I'm going to call the Infrastructure Committee to order. Would everybody please stand for the pledge? Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Number 3 is public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment? Anyone wishing to make public comment? No takers, so we'll move on to number 4. Approve the minutes of the June 2nd, 2022 Infrastructure Committee meeting. They're in your packet. Is there any discussion? Motion by Supervisor Dickinson. Second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. If there's no objection from the committee, I'd like to move 6A up before the discussion with our strategic plan. So we have Jamie Polly, our Parks Director, that is going to make some or give us a presentation on the the progress of the West Side Master Plan. So, Jamie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to share my screen and just give a little bit of an overview from the presentation that MSA, our consultant, had given to our Parks Commission back last month. They gave this. Oops. It was on there for a second. Let's see. Do you need to stop sharing? I wonder. Oh, there you go. Oh. It was up there for a second. There what? It's in the packet of the June or the May 31st Park Commission packet. So I can, while Lance is bringing that up, I can give a little bit in preface to that. So last year, the Infrastructure Committee gave us the direction when we went forward with the West Side Master Plan to plan the area. So the West Side Master Plan, again, includes Marathon Park, the UW, Stevens Point at Wausau campus, and all of West Street, including where the Highway Department is, all the way down to our Parks Department on Party Street. So the direction last year was that we would move forward with this planning process with the assumption that the the Highway Department and Parks Department would be moving off of that area, and that area will be set for redevelopment. So if you go up a little bit. Let's see. It's page 7 of the packet. So we've been moving forward. We hired MSA. The county put in $50,000 towards the study, and the city put in $30,000 for the study. We've been working through a number of different processes. Are you in the May 31st packet? So during this process, we've had a community survey that was available to the community. We had over 2,000 respondents to that survey. Then we had a community meeting. We had about 35 people at the community meeting, and then we had a follow-up survey to the concepts that they had put forward on our website that had, there you go. So if we scroll down, oh, I can come up there, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So this is the project area. Oops. Not touch screen. So the project area, as I mentioned. So this is the presentation that MSA gave the Park Commission just as an update. And they looked at all the uses of the area, specific uses with the university as Marathon Hall, the park, and then, like I said, with the assumption that West Street is going to be redeveloped. So I mentioned that we had a number of stakeholder engagements, and just looking at the schedule, kind of where we're at, they went to the Park Commission in May. We're now through June and July. So we had, as I mentioned, we had a follow-up survey that looked at the concepts that we had, but the concepts weren't concepts as a whole. We didn't want someone to comment on whether they liked concept 1, 2, 3, or 4, because each concept included a number of ideas. So we wanted to hear about what those ideas were, because maybe in concept 1, we liked the roads and how they were configured, but in concept 4, we liked how West Street was configured. So we had over 200 respondents to that follow-up survey on those specific ideas. So that's what they're working on right now, is looking at those ideas and putting them into a concept plan that we think is the best plan for this area, for the park, for West Street, and for UW campus. So we plan in August to come forward to our HR Finance Committee to give them an update, and our Parks Commission before it actually comes to the full county board in October. And we can give an update to this committee as well, and as they come through. The reason why I'm here to give you an update today is because we've had some different developments with the plans that I wanted to talk through, because it may be coming back to this committee in the future. So I talked about the survey results. This presentation is a part, if you want to look at it more in depth, I'll go through it fairly quickly, but more in depth, it is part of the May 31st Park Commission packet that's on the agenda, and there is some survey results of what we got there. So it did look like one of the most needed improvements of the park specifically was the parking. So the gravel all through the park was a big discussion, and how that park could be made to look nicer and be more usable, be safer with cars that don't drive really fast through the middle of it. Parking areas for different activities is really important. So I am going to skip down. Well, this is the area of where the highway department is, and what it looked like. So new uses south of the park. A lot of what's coming out of the surveys and a lot of what's coming out of the discussion is to really make that area an extension of the park with some different facilities there. The consultants have talked with developers, they've talked with residential developers, commercial and industrial developers, and being where the site's located and the railroad tracks there, it's not necessarily a high desired use for those activities, although they do have a couple plans where there is some residential there, some multifamily residential, but like I said, the railroad is not going away. So we still have the railroad cutting right through between the park and where the highway department is now. So looking at what our needs are for the county, they did some different concepts with that and kind of the ideas there. So I won't go through all these concepts, but in each concept, they look at rerouting the roads is a big part of that plan, of how we can slow traffic down, have it be more of a day use park where people can walk and be free of cars driving right through the middle. I think that's our major issue right now, is the cars and how they speed through where is the midway area of the fair. We do also have historic buildings that will not be touched in any way. We actually, going forward, any of the fair buildings are not going to be touched as far as removal. There may be some comments in there just for some improvements. We've already done roofing on most of them. We might need to do some painting, windows, facade improvements just to make them, they're aging facilities. But we do not have plans to remove or change any of the historic buildings. The only two that are actually on the historic registry, and Gary, you might be able to correct me, but I believe is the exhibition building and the show ring, possibly Cattle Barn 1 are the three buildings.
And the judging pavilion.
Yep, the judging pavilion. Okay.
And the exhibition building on the city register.
Oh, that's just on the
As
city
well
one.
as the
Okay.
big kitchen and the gate and the granite gates also.
Okay, so yep, so none of that right now is planned to be changed in any way. So really, it's looking at the park itself, the interior, and then West Street, this is one idea to put commercial building there with some residential. The pickleball, we've heard loud and clear from the pickleball that pickleball does not want to be near residential because they're loud and the balls hitting that is really loud. So that was taken from comments from them. Plus 12 courts is really desirable so they can have tournaments. Plus there's waiting lists every day for pickleball. If you go into the park and see the number of people using those courts, it's pretty amazing. And they need parking. So this concept, showing the pickleball, a lot of them show the pickleball out of the park. Maybe it's out of the park, maybe it's not. That's one of the things they're really vetting through right now. But one of the big ones I wanted to look at was concept 4, and that's really where I want to give you the update here is going forward, it looks as though probably the consultant is going to come forward with the idea of these recreation facilities on West Street. So currently, if you look at this corner right now, the county does not own. So that's the Ironworks building. So really, we can't do anything with that unless the county were to purchase that or have that ability. So really, it's from this line to the west that the county owns, which is the highway department and the cold storage building. This building right here is the shape of what would be a new ice arena. It's large enough where it would have 2 sheets and an indoor turf area. And then this building that is J would become just a large rentable facility that would still allow the cattle and the fair to use that building because they do need. That's another conundrum of the plan is how do we accommodate the fair and all of their uses. So the cattle need some place to go. So that's where that would go. One of the things with the ice arena, and we can go into more depth with this when I present this to different committees and to the county board, but the ice arena was built, the first sheet was built in 1974. The infrastructure for the cooling system, the compressors, the boards that were in there prior to just replacing them were all bought used from Eagle River when we built it in 1974. And we've been keeping those compressors going for 40, it's older than me, 40-some years. We do rebuild them, but the building is not energy efficient. It is, well beyond the useful life of what we're getting out of it. We'll continue to operate it as long as we can. But with that, we do have a brine leak in Rink 2, which means we have to, at some point, tear up the floor to find that leak, to fix that leak, because that's the cooling system. We have roofs that are leaking. We are going to be doing a temporary fix right now to make sure that we get the seals sealed up this year. It's really with snow melt is where we have the problems. And the building itself is not insulated, so the ice season is very limited to that late September to early March, because if it's too warm before that, we can't hold ice in the facility. If going longer, if it gets warm in April, we can't hold ice either. But the user groups are really in need of additional ice. So having ice season that could go longer would allow for more uses, additional revenue, and it's needed. There's only one sheet in the entire area that has ice in the summer, and that's the Greenhack Fieldhouse, and that is busy every day. Kids are doing youth camps, and our WASA kids can't get on the ice because it's a lot of the Everest teams over there. Even WASA West has to pay for additional ice time before the season over there just because they can't get on ours early enough. We do have the Cyclones, which is that NH3L team that we could potentially get a larger team in that would bring us in more revenue for that as well if we had a little bit of a bigger sheet. So knowing the infrastructure needs for that building, it could be maybe rebuilt in its current location. One of the reasons of moving it out here is because it's going to take, on a really good year, we could get an ice sheet built in 10 months, because I have that experience in Minnesota, but it was not easy and it's not ideal. But either way, we don't have 10 months between the end of the ice season to the beginning of the next one. So that would really put our school districts, for one, in a pickle, along with all of the other user groups. I did meet with Dr. Hiltz, the superintendent, yesterday to talk to him about this as well, knowing that our ice arena is home ice for East West and the Storm, which is the co-op girls of all the area. He's very well aware of it, and we're going to keep in contact because as the school district moves forward with some of their decisions made, then they're very interested in what happens with this facility and what they can maybe contribute. So that is future, knowing that this is all future. And then the indoor turf is in question. Right now we have it in here because it's posed as a need from our user groups, but the school district may also be looking at something like this, similar to what Everest is going to be putting up. And so therefore, if the school district does it, the county won't need to. So that is something we definitely want to stay step by step with the school district in, to make sure that we're not putting in facilities that are extra and not needed. We need to have what's best for the community and what can be utilized to the fullest. This right here is an outdoor turf. This has come up multiple times. We have looked at many of our parks to see if we could put that in. We would love to put it in at the sports complex, because the sports complex is a dump, it sinks, and you cannot put a synthetic turf facility on top of that. It needs to stay natural grass. So that's one idea there. So that's this concept. I guess what we're giving you an update to is in the process of doing this. So our consultants right now are working to complete a concept based on what the ideas of all those concepts and bring it forward. But we've had a little bit of discussion come up in the last couple weeks with the city, that the city may potentially be looking at West Street for their public works shop. They have gone back and forth. Now we've had a number of meetings with them on whether or not this is a viable site for them, because I would hate to bring forward this plan that we've worked on and have an idea that the county board can get behind and know that that's the future of once highway is relocated, just to have then the city come a couple months or a year later and say, no, we want this site, and so everything that we've looked at now needs to get reconfigured and shifted. To me, that's not a good use of our current resources that we're putting into this. So we are keeping our finger on that pulse as well. Public Works had some internal discussion with the mayor and within the city, and they are going to go back and revisit another city site in August that had been taken off the table. If that site, that's the more desirable site for everybody at the city. If they move to try to move there and they decide this is not where they want to go, then we'll proceed as we have. If they decide that they still want to really pursue West Street, we may be coming back to the HR Finance Committee for a change order to our current planning, which we do have the funding identified and the source identified already for that, to have an additional concept brought forward to the county board to consider, which there's actually two different concepts. One would be that this whole entire West Street would be then possibly sold to the city for development of their public works department, of what we own, or the county could retain what we currently own and plan to develop that, with the idea that if the city wants to move on West Street, they can negotiate their own sale with the Ironworks corner and take that, and then they've got some other options in the area too of negotiating sale of other businesses and relocating them. So that's kind of where we're at. We're still moving forward. We may have a little bit of a delay of a week or two until we know Public Works decision, and then we know whether or not we can bring that change order forward, or whether we can just continue as is and bring the best concept forward for discussion to the county board at a later date. Did I miss anything?
Thank you, Jamie. Are there any questions from the committee?
I have some.
Could you use your mic?
Okay. We've heard a lot on city this, city that, Wausau West, Wausau school systems. Is this all of Marathon County, or is it just the the city area. I mean, all of Marathon County is gonna pay for this, correct? Eventually?
Absolutely.
I mean, I didn't hear anything about Stratford, Athens, Abbotsford. I heard a lot of Wausau West, I heard a lot of DC Everest, I heard a lot of, are they gonna be involved financially, or how's that gonna work?
You want to take it?
Sure. Well, at this time, we don't know the funding source yet. I mean, we have to decide on a plan and decide what that facility is going to look like. The ice arena if you're talking about the ice arena specifically, even the turf field, they are utilized by the school districts heavily because that's their home ice, but they're also used by the communities, and it is all Marathon County. So Wausau Youth Hockey and DC Everest Youth Hockey pull kids from Athens and Edgar and all over because they don't have hockey associations there. Mosinee is the only one that has their own ice and their own hockey association. So when we look at these buildings, if this is the way we're going to go, then we would definitely look at what it includes and where the funding would come from. We don't have the funding identified at this point, but I think it needs to definitely be a public-private partnership. I don't see the county being able to be the sole source for any of this development. I think all of this has to work in partnership with the community.
The
Now,
only
is it,
thing-
is it being tracked where the people come from that are using it? Say the pickleball courts and all this. I mean, is there any tracking done that what part of the county these people are coming from?
Currently, we don't have specific tracking, but the pickleball is a very organized group. I could definitely reach out to them and we could find out where all of them are coming from. I think that's very easy data to get. Same with our hockey groups that come in and utilize the facility. All of them have rosters. We can see where they're coming from.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
just to add one thing kind of to Jamie's presentation about, the reason we wanted to get in front of this group to give you this update was because the change that, the new information that came that we heard about, which was the city of Wausau might be interested in purchasing that piece of property for their own use. Now, the county it's the county's property. You can choose to develop it in any way you see fit, which was the purpose of the master plan. County facilities are leaving. What is the board tasked staff with? What is the highest and best use for this property? We retained a consultant to do that analysis of the entire community. This new piece of information we're bringing to you because in our judgment, if the county board is presented with the opportunity to sell that parcel for revenue, because that's what you'd be doing if you sold it to the Public Works or someone else, we want to make sure that you have an option with respect to the rest of the park that allows you to make that decision. Because right now, the way the consultant, after gathering all the information that Jamie is talking about, it's looking like a fair number of park-related activities are moving to that West Street parcel, which doesn't allow you really the opportunity to sell that parcel and then still deliver a lot of the same activities that you currently do. Right now, you have an ice sheet in that parcel. Right now, you have pickleball within the park, the existing park. If the plan called for those things to move outside, and that was the plan that county board presented and approved, and then an opportunity presents itself to sell the parcel, and you choose to do so, then the plan essentially becomes of no value. So we wanted to make sure, hey, this is new information to us. We'll make you aware of it. Staff have met. We are confident Jamie met with the consultant. We know what the cost of that change order for that work. We're confident we have a funding source. You're identified should the city actually express stronger interest. That's what we asked them to do. Go back and really, are you serious about doing this? Because if so, we'll go this alternative route with a new concept. And we'll bring that, if we hear from the city that there is significant interest, we will bring that to the HR Finance and Property Committee to propose a budget transfer with an identified source. Certainly, it's up to HR Finance or the board. If you don't want us to do that, you can vote that down and say, no, we want to just go forward with the plan as it exists, but we wanted to make you aware of it.
Supervisor Dickinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in that regard, if someone's potentially looking at purchasing our facilities, do we have to do we have any ordinance or any code or statute requirement to offer that to someone else to purchase? Can we, or is that just, hey, Wausau, you can go ahead and take it? Is there any requirement there?
You don't have a requirement if, you have requirements when you're looking to divest yourself of certain properties, and Jim does that with right-of-ways. There's a process in place for that. But I'm not aware of any ordinance that requires if a county-owned parcel, if there's an offer to purchase on it, if someone were to make an offer to purchase, that the county has any obligation to put out perhaps an RFP for that. That doesn't preclude you from doing it. I know HR Finance has had discussions about property divestment, just as an example. You know, in the next 18 months, we'll be able to look at future uses for the current social services building because our staff are being relocated to some space on the Lakeview campus. But we don't have a formal process in place for what that's going to look like. I think it certainly behooves us to start to think about what that looks like, but I'm not aware of anything, Supervisor. I think that's a great question. I have had some, at least one individual express interest in making an offer to purchase on a piece of property that the county owns that's within this West Side Master Plan planning area, and I have said just that. Hey, if you're gonna make an offer to purchase, you can make it, and I will bring it to my board, but I haven't received anything as of yet. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. One more question? Go ahead, Supervisor.
So another question is, you identified, Jamie, that there's no funding source for this. Do we have a cost for these concepts? Because I think cost would matter in determining which route you'd want to go. So if you don't really have a funding source and you don't really have a cost, wouldn't it be kind of difficult to decide on which concept?
That is part of the task of the consultant when they come forward with the concept that they've put together through all this whole process. There will be cost estimates included with that. Yes, that's part of their work.
Just to add to that, again, I think one of the struggles that we've had as staff is we have, to Jamie's point, we have an ice sheet that is heavily utilized, very valued by the community, with components in it that are just slightly older than I am, that were purchased, used before that. So we're gonna have capital expenditures if the county board wants to continue to deliver that service, to keep that up. One of the plans, and Jamie's got it up, is concept 4, where, you know, rather than putting temporary fixes on that, it's, hey, build new and relocate, but absolutely the county board. At the end of the day, I say it all the time, you guys have policy questions. What services do we deliver? And one of the things through the budget that you're gonna have the opportunity to address is, what are you willing to pay? And to Jamie's point, that's one of the things we're trying to do is, it doesn't make sense. It's always kind of been an area where, I know Jamie and I have had these conversations, with parks and schools, it's interesting to me that we have parks that are maintained very well, and within several blocks, we often have schools that have playgrounds that look and feel very similar. And it would be great if we could kind of pool those resources and make them available for the community. And there is a mechanism in the statute to do that, but I think we have opportunities there. That's why we're reaching out to the school districts as a user of that ice. Similarly, we're reaching out to all the user groups for whether it's field turf, the soccer groups, seeing what the need is. That's the first part of this study with these consultants, is really looking at what does the community need look like into the future, much like your 2050 transportation study. What is the need for the community relative to Marathon Park look like for the next 50 years? Because it's going to take us a couple years to hopefully move the highway department and everything else, but you know, we need a vision and we need the county board to set that. So that's what we're bringing information to you hopefully through this consultant. And then at the end of the day, the county board can pick what direction they want to go. So if you want to redevelop that into, you want to sell it, we could put an RFP out to divest ourselves of that property, as kind of alluded to by Supervisor Dickinson. Or if we just make it available, make it known that we're looking for anyone to purchase it for any purpose, you can do that as well. You know, the beauty of an RFP, you see a lot of municipalities use them saying, we want this sort of specific use to go here, as opposed to is just a straight divestment where you leave it up to the landowner, what their intent to use the land would be.
Thank you.
Just have
Supervisor
one more
Dickinson?
thing, and then I'm done. I was just, we're going to be talking about strategic plan, comprehensive plan, and in Chapter 11, recreation, tourism, and cultural resources, I think there's some important ideas here to focus on. And item number one says, ensure access to quality, accessible, affordable recreation opportunities. Ensure that new parks and park renovations are constructed with universal design. I think universal design speaks to what Supervisor Soibert, excuse me, is talking about. Universal design for anyone who wants to use that area. I think that's important. B says maintain and improve the county park system in a cost-effective manner. C, establish a consistent source of funding for parks, rec, and forestry. And then 4, minimize use conflicts of recreational activities and resource impacts, which she talked about with the road going through and how we're going to develop that. So I would just direct you to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion for Jamie? All right, well, thank you very much for the update on the West Side Master Plan. All right, we'll move back up to number 5, policy issue for discussion and possible action. 5A, recommendations to the Executive Committee for updates to the strategies, objectives, and expected outcomes found in the 2018-2022 strategic plan. We started to talk about this at our last meeting as far as the Infrastructure Committee is the lead committee for 8.7 jointly with the Triple ED Committee and the lead committee for 10.12. The discussion we started with last meeting was I felt that this current strategic plan should be updated and not completely scrapped. We had this same discussion at executive last month, and the consensus was that they felt that this current strategic plan, which is due to expire the end of this year, should be updated also with the strategies, the objectives, outcome measures. So each standing committee is asked to look at the objectives that they are lead committees for. And like I said, ours is 8.7 and 10.12, and review them. And there was some discussion with some of the supervisors last month about if there was any current updates that were available to these strategies and objectives and outcome measures. And I want to thank Administrator Leonard and the department heads and all their staff. They were they were able to come up with the most current, or compile the most current updates on these individual objectives. And what my thoughts are is that we look at 8.7, and there are the updates on there. But before we get into that, Supervisor Robinson, who's the chair of the Broadband Task Force, wanted to update us on the PSC grants. So if we want to start there, Supervisor Robinson, if you would like to give those to us, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have some good news. We earlier this year were partners with 3 applicants to the Public Service Commission. There was a solicitation for $100 million of grant funding through the PSC's Broadband Expansion Grant process. The PSC expanded that to $124 million, taking their whole biennial allocation and spending it in the first year. So there will be no state money after this round. But we supported an application by Serenity or Wittenberg Tel for expansion in the town of Reed and others that was not funded. In the past, they have tended to support smaller projects. They did, however, fund the other 2 applications. One was from Bug Tussle, serving 636 residents in the Cronewater area, Cronewater and Holton area. And the second one was for Frontier North, serving about 10,000 businesses and residents throughout portions of the county. And I should have provided a map, but you received this information last year if you were on the board. Frontier is all over the county, looking to expand fiber into many of the areas where they currently have landlines, the copper landlines. So we should see a significant expansion. But in the context of the Wittenberg, the Bug Tussle, they received a $3 million grant, and they're matching it with $3 million. Marathon County had pledged $235 per business or dwelling served. We had also agreed to enter into discussions with them about a potential loan similar to what we had done last year. We'll have those discussions going forward. Frontier they received a $4.2 million grant with a $13 million match. The county share of that is about $944,000. They also received money from other local units of government or pledges of support from the town of Frankfort, $50,000, and the town of Harrison at $15,000. Ours is $944,835,000. So we will have a significant expansion of broadband over the next 2 years. They have 2 years in which to do this work. So hopefully we'll deal with many of the underserved areas. The task force is now looking at how do we prioritize our efforts going forward. And we'll be looking at the GEO Partners speed test that's being done through the Economic Development Associations in the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to try to target where we're going. Bug Tussle is moving ahead with their efforts on that bonding in that partnership. They've got 3 towers on air, 4 under construction, 10 within regulatory zoning process, and they're still working on 6 sites for towers, and then they're connecting those with fiber, and we'll be offering connections to the residents along the way, and they're keeping us informed of their progress. So there's a lot going on in the county. Charter is advancing their project in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. They're working in the northern part of the county, and they've got plans, and we've shared that with you in the past, and we're still waiting to hear what's happening with LTD broadband relative to their Rural Digital Opportunity Fund application. But this is exciting news where we can hopefully, as a result of these efforts, provide service to about 11,000 residents and businesses in the county.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson. Are there any questions for Supervisor Robinson?
I don't know if you can answer.
Go ahead,
You can
Supervisor.
answer this, Supervisor, but I know Bug Tussle is building towers right across Marathon County line in Wood County. Is Marathon County going to share those towers with Wood County, or is that strictly going to be a Wood County thing, or how does that work? Those towers are really close to the Marathon County line.
When they're building the towers, the towers are part of their communication system, and they are a component of delivering internet services. They're the wireless component. Typically, from a wireless perspective, there's a limited area where they're effective in transmitting those services, but Bug Tussle was successful in also receiving funding for the Wood County project, 139.1 million or miles of fiber ring, and I imagine that will serve parts of McMillan and in other areas. The advantage of the towers is that typically Bug Tussle partners with AT&T, which increases cellular service, and it fills some gaps. And 52% of the data that is transmitted goes through the towers, not through your fiber optic line. You need fiber to move it from tower to tower, but most of your data that you're getting is coming through your cell phones. So we would benefit from that. But I know that they've got a plan. You know, they were successful in Taylor, Wood, Marathon, Rock, Oneida counties, Kewanee, Jefferson, Jackson, Green Lake, Clark. So they had an expansive, they were the #1 recipient of funding through the PSC this last round. We will benefit from that. The benefit of the towers in the county is part of our agreement with them, going back to, again, the action we took last year. We have 24 fibers in the fiber that they're laying in the ground that they'll make available to us, and they also provided to us space on those towers. And that space on the towers would be available for law enforcement needs and other needs that we would have. And Jerry and Bill Milhausen have been working with them. I don't know that if we would have access or need to access those towers for the purposes of public safety, but those towers also help with the FirstNet system in interconnectiveness for law enforcement and others in our response. So we value from that. Our residents value from that as they're moving from one community to another. The towers are, you know, they'll sell the service, but then again, they partner with telecom services, and you should see significantly enhancements to cellular service.
Thank you. Any other questions? Concerns? Thank you, Supervisor Robinson. So moving on with the update, I just want to get some thoughts from the committee. Like I said, my thoughts are to review each one of these strategies that are supposed to be used to accomplish the objective and the outcome measures. And if we start with 8.7, I think this one's going to be relatively quick to review and see how we want to move forward, or what we were going to recommend to the executive committee on 8.7. So in your, like I said, if you have those updates from Administrator Leonard, it goes through each one of the strategies, lists what has been done or accomplished with them. And then the outcome measure, which there's only one outcome measure in 8.7. So does anybody else have any suggestions on how we should move forward with updating 8.7? Supervisor Dickinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess when I look at this and we have these couple primary slides, I don't see why we just shouldn't go right through it bit by bit, each strategy, you know, and then look at each outcome measure. And if something's completed, whether you put an X through it and you keep it in the plan, or whether you highlight it in red that it's done, however that overarching, you know, creative kind of way of putting it in the plan. But I think for the work we're doing, cross them off and then move on to the next slide and do the same thing. And then you can get into what do we add into each one. You know, do we keep 8.7 completely? And if so, what are we going to add into it? The same with the other. I would just kind of go through it systematically that way.
Thank you. Those were my thoughts too. And like I said, 8.7, there's 5 strategies, and if you look at the updates from the administrator, it's relatively easy as far as strategy A. In 8.7, develop a comprehensive approach to countywide high-speed internet access through fiber, copper, power lines, cellular, Wi-Fi, new radio frequencies, and other emerging technologies. I think the work that the Broadband Task Force has done has accomplished that. So I guess I'll ask Supervisor Robinson, is there any more that can be added to that strategy, or should we consider it complete with what's moving forward with the current internet?
Well, we continue to have problems in our sparsely populated areas, and I think what we need to do is look at focus, with those areas that are both population in geography or geology challenged. So we continue to need to look at how do we target our resources and drive. Currently we've been relying on the internet service providers to define the service areas, and there are communities like Harrison, Gunther, and portions of Texas and others that are challenged because of not enough people, not a high enough return on investment, or wireless won't work because of trees and hills. So we'll have to continue to work on that going forward and identify how we will drive internet service providers' interest in those areas. So I think we can cover it through what's there, but we still have work to do.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you. I would, looking at these, I think we could argue that we're doing well on A, B, C, and E. We haven't done much on D yet. I think to what John's talking about, if I was going to be tinkering with these, I would maybe consider adding one that says identify what's left as the next area. Maybe within. So what's going to happen is there's a lot of stuff going on this year that'll finish next year. Charter, Frontier, Bug Tussle. So there's a lot of it by the end of 2023. I think that would be a time where the county should take a hard look and find out what didn't get covered well and identify the next big areas to focus on, because we did do some of C and actually put money into some of the grant applications. And I could see us identifying what would be the areas of the county that are the next big gap areas at the end of 2023. And decide where we want to put any future investment for us to matching money and grants and the like. And then the second thing I would want the committee to consider is maybe we should be looking at redoing one of these so it says support and drive policy change at the state level. There's still a ton of things that could happen in Madison that would help make make it easier for broadband to expand. And we have talked about that a few times, but it's not on one of our particular tasks. So those would be the two things that I would consider.
Okay, thank you.
And then if I can add one more thing on the measurement on the bottom, we did not make that measurement. There's not 9,800 new households by 2019. So that should probably be updated. I think if you set that for early 2024, you probably can make that number.
Okay. I'm just looking at the information that Administrator Leonard put in the update, so I'll let him address that.
Yeah, Jerry, I think quite honestly, when this plan was put in place, that was before that was at the tail of CAF 2, so I think they met the number, but it wasn't really due in large part to.
The definition of high speed.
Yeah.
It's not the same
Right.
definition of high speed.
So
now,
I think we clearly need, staff would benefit from further direction relative to the strategies you want us to employ. And I think to Supervisor Dickinson's point, if you want to go methodically through these, one thing from staff perspective, I would share that it has been very helpful to have the broadband task force meeting and providing that direction to staff. Okay, apply for these. We want you to be working on these grants, sit down, meet with these people. I think that has been a very effective task force. So if the committee is looking for strategy modifications, it's very hard for me to know whether I could give you my opinion whether or not we developed a comprehensive approach to countywide high-speed internet access under A, but that's mushy. But it's a much more directive, clear thing for staff to do, which is staff should support the ongoing work of the broadband task force. I think that would be helpful for us, but we can go through, and if you guys have questions based on what's in my update that I sent via email to all of you, be happy to try to provide them to you.
Thank you. So as far as going through the strategies and the outcome measures, I think like I said, when I referred to A, do we want to leave that strategy in there, or do we want to add some different a different strategy about the underserved yet after 2023? Or is that covered, in any of the A, B, C, D, or E, that strategies that are up there? John, go ahead.
We did develop a comprehensive approach. It was called the Design 9 study, and that called for a series of towers and connecting infrastructure. And the problem there was the state law that didn't allow us to operate it, so we were forced to rely on the internet service providers. When we took that plan to them, said, if we build it, will you use it? And the unanimous answer was no, they wouldn't. They wanted their own fiber at that time. So I think what we need to do is, I think we need to develop a comprehensive targeted plan for and underserved areas of the county. So I would modify that strategy to deal with the and underserved. And I would put, the rate of speeds has changed, because when the objective was created, or the outcome measure, we were talking 10-1, 10 down, 1 up, based on the CAF funding for Frontier. They moved to 25-3, and now they're talking 100-100, and in the RDOF area, they're talking about gigabyte service. So I don't know if we want to establish a minimum. The committee, or the task force, had recommended a minimum of 50 2 years ago, relative to if we were going to engage financially, we wanted at least 50 megabytes per second down. Do we want to have a target speed? Those are all issues that we can either deal with as an objective, or as we're moving our way through our support of internet service provider grant applications.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson?
So along those lines, strategy A really is about supporting a continued comprehensive approach, ... Then your outcome measure, if you want to look at what high-speed internet is, you can quantify that as 50 and 10, or 50 and 20, or whatever that is. Or you could put it in as whatever the current standard is as well. But this document is only going to last a few years, so really, if you look at that, you can put that outcome measure in as 50, whatever, or 100, or what, I don't think you want to go too high, but
I agree. I was just going to bring up that not only put that in there, but in the outcome measure, put in there to try to accomplish serving more of the people that are underserved or not served. I think that could fit under an outcome measure. I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks, or add it as a strategy, but I think that would be, right now we were able to accomplish the 9,800. We don't know at what speed, and we don't know how many of the underserved or people that are not served at all are still out there to try to reach those people. Chairman Gibbs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the things that that has been clearly identified is we need to. We've done a lot of things, and the task force and this county board and the county board has obviously put money where its mouth is in expanding broadband in this county. We leveraged our funding, our borrowing capacity to bug tussle to a very large project, a $25 million project in the county. And we're starting to see some of those results. We're within a mile of my place, we're seeing a tower that's starting to be erected. Yesterday was a prime example. They were plowing conduit in front of my house. I don't have broadband, don't profess to even begin to have broadband. So I think one of the things that we need to identify is that strategy to inventory what we have, as Jerry had pointed out, by the end of 2023, I think things are going to be looking a lot different. One of the things that was identified when I talking to the individuals that were plowing conduit into my area was the challenge is right now capacity to actually put fiber into operation. In other words, they have conduit now that they have plowed. They don't have fiber in the conduit, nor do they have the capacity to find anybody to splice that conduit and put it into each of the houses. So, I think by the end of 2023, we can do an inventory, and then we need to change our strategy, and that strategy is to target and force, if not force, that's probably a poor choice of words, but target our resources at those areas that are still underserved or not served at all in those sparsely populated areas.
Thank you.
Once they've been identified, because I think one of the things that is still a challenge is even though right now my house would be identified as being unserved with broadband, it at some point will be, because now I have conduit and/or I will have within a mile a tower access for the fixed wireless. So I'll have some options by the end of this year, but for sure by the end of next year.
Thank you. So just moving, and what I'm hearing is that we should keep strategy A in there, or is there, or do you want to add anything to it?
My recommendation was just to change the beginning part of the language, just to say support a continued comprehensive approach. We've already developed it, so you don't have to do that anymore. And then the outcome measure, I would eliminate that one on the bottom completely. You're never gonna, you're trying to find data that potentially doesn't exist. So.
All right, so, thank you. There's consensus then that we'll just change the wording of the strategy A to continue to develop, comprehensive plan. We already have that, so if that's acceptable, as far as the outcome measure, you wanted to remove that completely, or do we need an outcome measure?
If I could, I guess what I would say is maybe we shouldn't eliminate it, but we should change it to December 31st, 2023. That will increase the number of households with access to high-speed internet.
Or serve 85% of the residents, 90%. If I could we could target, the Design 9 plan called for serving 85% of the residents of the county.
I don't think that Bug Tussle will get it all built out. Need that number though.
Well, but you got Bug Tussle, you got Ardoff, you've got Frontier, you've got,
That stuff will probably 3 years out before they're done.
right. Well, we could put a number. These are objectives and they're stretches. We're trying to.
Do you want to include the speed?
The Broadband Task Force put 50-10 in its last official action, although most of the funding sources are now at 100 as a base. It would be hard for us to go back and say 85% at 100 because many of the systems are currently at 25.3. So
I was just asking. I wasn't.
Every year it changes. Every year the usage and demand goes up 30%. So whatever number we put in there will be wrong.
Okay.
So I would say if we're looking at objective, we should try to get 85% of the county served by 2023. And if we don't, we have a plan in place to deal with the rest.
Good. Thank you.
And then if I could just pick up on maybe one of those objectives, that the partnerships is important, but the partnerships really are with those internet service providers. Local governments have been a good tool, and I think they helped the Frontier application with cost sharing. We should continue to encourage that. But McDevco has not played a role to date due to staffing limitations. Not to say that Kim Weber couldn't be it, but we've not really, we've partnered with other entities, but not necessarily McDevco. So I don't know if we need the reference to McDevco in there.
If I can elaborate on that, I don't know what the root cause of that is. My sense, and this is to use some of your language before, I'm probably wrong, but you know, McDevco, one of the things they do very well is gap financing. And in our conversations at the Broadband Task Force and with the meetings with the internet service providers, they have access to capital at a lower interest rate than what McDevco can provide. So I'm not sure, I think to partner on Supervisor Robinson's point, I'm not sure McDevco is the right tool there because, you know, they're, like I said, they're providing a different form of financial support. I believe we've seen over the last, quite honestly, that certainly the last Public Service Commission grant cycle, that access to capital is very, very important. You know, our grant dollars that we pledged for those submissions, I think we, correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Robinson, but we put in, essentially the county put in a little over about $4 million in a total of $23 million worth of projects are now moving forward, so pretty good return on investment. But if you have any thoughts on perhaps a better strategy directive, I think Strategy C certainly meets the mark of, you know, we want to make sure we're responsive to ISPs in terms of what would be the incentive to bring them to the table. But I agree, I don't know that McDevco is really the right.
May I suggest we just strike the last two words on that one? Just say, get rid of through McDevco, and the rest of it should work.
Any comments on striking that? Those two words through McDevco? Good with that? Okay, thank you. All right, Strategy C, Administrator Leonard just touched on that a little bit. I think we have done that. Supervisor Robinson, have we done that with the grants and all the other programs, or is there something that needs to be added to that or changed, or is that continue to be good through 2023?
I think that's fine as it's worded.
Anyone else? Okay. Then moving on to Strategy D, establish a dig once policy for the county roadways, reconstruction and bridge projects through engaged providers and engaged providers, a discussion about whether to include conduit for fiber. That was not accomplished. I'm not sure what, I don't know if Jim or Supervisor Robinson.
Well, that was moved to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and it is stalled there, and will work. I know the city of Wausau was interested in developing it. They were looking at models in Colorado and in other states, but it really hasn't. There is continued interest in it, so I think it should stay as an objective, but it's probably more of a metro issue, and I know many of the communities have that interest, but it's, I think, been a workload issue.
Thank you. So what are the thoughts of the rest of the committee? I didn't realize that it had been stalled, but like I said, if that's something we want to continue to pursue, Chairman Gibbs?
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad strategy. I think the problem is that you have internet providers that don't want to utilize conduit or what have you that is owned by someone else. And so literally they're willing to put conduit in the ground right next to conduit in the ground. And so I think the strategy is fair for work in the incorporated municipalities. I think it's challenging in the rural community because effectively the providers say, no, I want to have my own, I want to use my own conduit, and I don't care what you say, I'm going to plow right next to somebody else's conduit.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jerry.
There's a little movement on this. The state DOT has just recently made some changes. They haven't like went all the way out to say you have to use conduit, but they've said you have to register with us if you're going to be a provider, and we'll tell you about any construction projects we have in an effort to try to share conduit. So they kind of went sort of like they went a little ways there. That was just recently in the last few weeks.
But, and I think that enlightens, into one of your other comments, or leads into one of your other comments, and that is how can we utilize and try to pressure the legislature in, effectively changing legislation that will be an advantage to everyone.
Thank you. So consensus is to leave it the way it's worded? Okay. All right. Moving on to strategy E, Marathon County government will invite all carriers providing services in Marathon County to present their current coverage speeds and costs. Go ahead, Supervisor Robinson, and then Supervisor Dickens. Go ahead.
Well, I think we're starting to do that. We're working on a website that will have links to all of the providers and others, but it's not an area that we can control. We can just, it's an educational component. And I know that between Sarah and Norm, that they were working on developing that inventory.
Go ahead, Chris.
So what I was going to say is, yeah, I don't, it's not something we can do. We can't force anyone to give us their information, but it is the educational aspect that we can publish if we wanted to, a document, what those rates are, and we could do it every 6 months if we wanted to. We could do it every year. All it takes is someone to go out there and do a couple clicks, and you can put that in, and if you wanted to, for whatever reason, you can make an outcome measure that once a year will publish what these rates are, if that's necessary. I don't even know if it's necessary, but because people need to kind of find that information on their own.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
I think the intent was to be that educational component and do the link to the webpage and make sure that those are updated and leave it up to them and saying, in this portion of the county, these are the providers, and just update it so people would know where to go should they want to go into that or move into that area or whatever. It was not, I think we want to be careful to say that here are the providers, you do, we'll provide the link, you do the rest.
Thank you. So leave it, change it, reword it. I understand, as Supervisor Dickinson said, people can find that out by calling and see how much the services are, but is that something we, like, and I don't think we can force them to, we can invite them to give that information to us. So do we eliminate it or do we change the wording?
I think what Nora's did was reached out and asked them all to just list if they provided any of the 4 quadrants, so northeast, southwest, southeast, and it would just basically, if it's done, it's not been completed yet, but the website would just say, if you're in the southwest quadrant of the southwest section of the county, here's all the providers, and you'll have to call them and find out if they serve you or not, with a link. Yeah, I think that's practical, and you could. To Supervisor Dickinson's point, you could just say that once a year you check and make sure that's the right list, perhaps.
So the strategy in that regard is assist Marathon County citizens with information on current carrier costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That sounds good. So reword it in Lee's strategy E, but reword it. Sounds like a plan. Thank you. And we got the outcome measure taken care of. So these changes will be presented to the executive committee for 8.7. Do we take a vote on that now, or are we bring back a draft? Okay. All right. We can then move on to the second objective that infrastructure as a lead committee, and that's 10.12. Maintain infrastructure support, economic growth. And those updates are also in Administrator Leonard's email. So, starting with the strategies, there's 6 of them. A is maintain a safe highway network to provide access to all communities in the county. Is there, as far as the compliments on that, underneath his email, it says maintain safe highway. It says develop a county-wide safety plan, installing edge lines, rumble strips in accordance with the plan, enhancing edge lines, add groove, wet reflective and grooved reflective edge lines, wet reflective higher grade glass beads, and milled County Highway X 2022 and process where edge lines is milled into asphalt through County Road T in 2023. So those, I think, are accomplishing that strategy. I don't know if that should be changed or continue it for 2023 as far as strategy A. Supervisor Dickinson.
I don't see any need to make any change to that. My only question was, this is actually an objective under being prosperous, not under being safe. I don't want to get into a big discussion about that. I just thought that was interesting. But strategy A seems good to me. It's something you're going to be doing all the time.
Correct.
You would always keep that strategy. And I would offer up, even moving into strategy B, it's something we're doing all the time. So I don't see any reason getting rid of that, although I would adjust strategy B to include at home as well, not just the workplace, because people work from home.
Okay, good change. Any other thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Just a minor change, that X project should be 2023 instead of 2022.
Okay, on the update, yeah,
Trying to get you guys to move faster, Jim. Sorry about that. I'll make the change.
all right. So A and B is taken care of, unless there's any other discussion on those. We move on to C, work with municipalities to maintain a competitive inventory of serviced industrial land and office sites. Under the email from Administrator Leonard, there's been the 2020 Design 9 for Marathon County project was done. This one here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, C is, there's been, they've been working with McDevco, and again, are they working? Is McDevco working with us? Go ahead.
I think this is an area that actually got brought up at, I think the Environmental Resources Committee, Mr. Chair, during your conversation there. You know, Marathon County's strategy relative to economic development, I think building on Supervisor Dickinson's point, this is in the prosperous section of the plan, so some of the things they certainly have an economic development component to them, and I think strategy C is a good example of that. However, we don't have economic development staff. Marathon County does not have any person in any department, at least not that I know of, that works in what you would normally call an economic development space. We have utilized McDevco to perform some economic development activities, the revolving loan fund I referenced before, but you'll see this throughout my summary that I emailed to all the board members. For those areas that are really focused on economic development, you'll see that our progress is perhaps not as robust as anyone would prefer, or certainly not as robust as some of the other areas where we have staff that can do that work on a daily basis. I think this is a good example. So there are inventories within municipalities. So the Village of Weston, for example, has an economic development staff person. The town of Rib Mountain has economic development staff. We don't. We don't have people working in that space. So if there's a desire to keep this in the plan and set some more robust targets, I think I'm going to ask for some clarification. How do you know, what does that look like for success? And then how do we make sure that there are the necessary resources to accomplish it?
Supervisor Gisselman?
Well, how can we become the most prosperous county in Wisconsin if we don't have staff and the infrastructure indeed to develop that? It seems to me that when we put that vision together, it seems like there should have been some thought to having the county staff or even the county board with regard to how to enforce that. But if there's nobody there to do that, how is that going to happen? Maybe somebody hasn't. I'm new to the, after a while, but I'm new, you know, and I would just like to have, how can we do that?
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
Well, we do contribute to McDevco, and we have 3 supervisors on the McDevco board. So I think we, you know, through our contribution to them, we do have that. While we don't have dedicated staff, I know that, you know, for instance, Jim is part of his looks at that highway projects that affect businesses, all season roads, et cetera. So we sort of delegated it, and it's diffused in every department. But you raise a good point. There's not a coordinative person or a point person in the county, but we do provide either funding to other entities to provide that service to us, or rely on staff.
Thank you. Supervisor Seibert?
Thank you. I personally don't think that the county needs to be involved. We've got every city, every town that has an economic development, industrial parks, housing developments. Do we need to compete with those? I don't think we do. Let the towns have what they want, develop what they want, and the county can help in any way, but I don't think we need to, say, go out and build an industrial park and compete with Marathon or Edgar or Stratford or Wausau or Weston. I mean, they all have their own, so that's just my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson?
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I don't see where this fits into what we do in infrastructure. It's an economic development item. The infrastructure to assist with access for trucks or whomever needs to get there, but it seems very strictly an economic item, and I would actually strike it from our slide.
Supervisor Gisselman?
Well, just sort of as it's just something we do. We do it for the good of the county. It doesn't, you know, I think in support of economic growth. I think Mr. Dickinson saying is we do it anyways. We do it for the county, and I think that that's a good point. If an economic growth isn't that key to economic growth, isn't why we do infrastructure. It's infrastructure. We do it for a lot of other reasons, I would think.
Thank you. Minister Lewin?
Just to ask, again, a more pointed question, I don't, all good comments. To the question of whether or not strategy C stays there, I guess my question to you, if you believe there's value to actually having this inventory of serviced industrial land and office sites, I mean, I'm not suggesting that the only way to accomplish that is to have a county staff person do it. I mean, quite honestly, we could certainly contract with McDevco to say, here's money specifically for this purpose. It's a service contract to get it. We haven't done that to this point, and I can't speak, I'm not on the McDevco the board, but I can't speak to where that falls in their priority list. But if it's not a priority, if you don't believe it's important for the county to have that inventory, and I think to Supervisor Soibert's perspective, allow the individual municipalities to be the point of contact for economic development. If I'm an outside business and I want to relocate to the county, and it's incumbent upon me to reach out to the town of Rib Mountain or Wausau or Weston or Mosinee or Edgar, that's fine. Then I would kindly ask that you do strike that from the plan. Otherwise, it's something that keeps me up at night, and I try to figure out how to do it. But if you want us to do it, then that direction to me, I would start to bring back a plan as to how to accomplish it.
Chairman Gibbs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the thing that I'm seeing is, I think there's value in identifying, where those opportunities are, but I think providing direction directly to McDevco to accomplish that, and then how do we also support economic development? I think is have a actual criteria as to how do we support TIFs, and when do we not support TIFs, because that is a huge amount of economic dollars that this county is foregoing through the TIF development.
Thank you. I agree with Supervisor Dickinson and Seibert about it. I think this can be accomplished without it being something that to complete an inventory. We're asking staff to do that, and like I said, McDevco, if they're going to do it, it's going to cost resources. So I would be in favor of removing it. I'm not sure what the rest of the committee is. I know there's some thoughts to keep it. So what is the consensus? Is there to remove it or to leave it and reword it, change it? If anybody's against it, removing it. Anybody's against it? No, I just want to get a consensus. Supervisor Dickinson?
As written, maintaining a competitive inventory just doesn't fit to what Supervisor Gibbs was talking about. If you're saying we're going to work with McDevco or some other entity to help have business parks in the county because it's important to us, it's something you can have, but for us in infrastructure, I don't see a fit. To me, that seems more of an economic, is it EDC or whatever, for them to focus on. Because the next item, you talk about provide appropriate access for trucks and employees for all business and industrial park sites. Okay, that's more of what we do. I don't know how we accomplish that. You built something, and you need a road. I mean, we put a road in. But that's certainly more than what we would do. So I would, as written strategy C, I just don't think it fits. And I would say take it out.
All right. So remove it? All right. Then strategy D, provide appropriate access for trucks and employees in all businesses and industrial park sites. And Supervisor Dickinson brought up how we do that in Administrator Leonard's updates. It talks about we do approximately 30 miles, we pave approximately 30 miles of roads each year with federal and state system providing interstate movements. I think what we're doing is offering the ability for trucks to get from industrial places to communities in the area by having good roads. So I don't think that one is ever going to change. We're going to continue to, I'm assuming, to do the 30 miles of paving every year. And like I said, that just improves the roadways for the trucks to use. So is there any comments on that? Changes? Leave it? Okay. Then we'll move on to D, or E, I should say, pursue federal and state funding and develop county and countywide revolving loans funds to assist communities with cleanup and contaminated sites. And that's also in his email that he sent to E. No work has been done in assisting communities with cleanup of sites. Efforts instead was focused on private sites such as manure pits and private-owned on-site wastewater treatment system, or POUTs. Administrator Leonard?
Sure, I can just elaborate on that. When we referenced the pout systems and manure pits, primarily the pout system, we did allocate $750,000 toward what we believed to be a replacement for the Wisconsin Fund. Now, we believe the Wisconsin Fund was going to no longer be funded by the state of Wisconsin. It has been, but we anticipate that funding to go away. We're actually in the process of trying to make some changes to that program because, quite honestly, people haven't made use of it. So we need to look at the eligibility criteria. But to Supervisor Dickinson's point before about, or I believe Supervisor Soibert, where the discussion about what's the municipality's role, certainly municipalities are more active when they have a piece of property within their community that requires cleanup, but we haven't done that at least during my tenure. I know previous to that we have with now the soccer complex site was a partnership with the county to provide some cleanup services, but we haven't established a standalone revolving loan fund for that. So again, if we want to keep it some direction on what that might look like or what you're trying to accomplish would be helpful. Probably more what you were trying to accomplish. I did a little bit of research on this, and I found it a program in a county in the state of Wisconsin, in La Crosse, to address blighted neighborhoods throughout the county in terms of housing development, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time because I wasn't sure if you wanted, after this discussion, I'll be able to make a better determination as to how much my time should go there, but that's really the only thing I've found thus far.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Dickinson?
I don't see where it fits with what we're doing in infrastructure. We haven't spoken about in the 2.25 years that I've been on the board and on the infrastructure committee. What it seems like to me, if we look at the comprehensive plan on item 5, they copied items A through E, and there are strategies A through E. They're just a direct copy. It's like, okay, well, we're going to figure out a way for infrastructure to have some kind of impact in economic growth, so let's just plop all 5 of them in there. And I think that's where C and E kind of seem out of place for what we're doing here.
All right, any other suggestions, discussion? Supervisor Robinson?
Just more for clarification, I don't think we put any money into Holtz-Krause, but I think we did put money into the city's waterfront development project north of Scott Street relative to lead remediation through the ATC fund years ago, but we haven't done that with the commitment of the dollars to the POUTS system, so our ability to do that, and we can always partner with parties relative to grants, whether they're brownfield grants on the federal or through EPA, through the brownfield grant assessment. I don't know that that requires a specific delineation in our strategic plan.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So there was a suggestion from Supervisor Dickinson to remove E. Is that acceptable consensus with the rest of the committee? Okay. Thank you. All right, the last one, F, secure state and federal funding to maintain infrastructure and support economic growth. And if you look at the email from Administrator Leonard on F, we do secure a lot of bridge and road money from the state and federal, so I I don't know that we want to stop doing that, so it's a way for us to maintain our bridges and roadways. Supervisor Dickinson?
I'm with you, we should keep it. I have an addition, though, when we get to that.
Okay. All right, so keep. All right, well, then moving down to the outcome measures. Outcome measure number 1 through December 31st, 2022, the county highway overall pavement surface evaluation and rating scores will remain at an average of 7.0. So that's, we're going to have a discussion about that in, just a little bit later, but I think if anybody has any questions about the rating as far as the 7 versus 6 or 5 or 10, I think Jim Griesbach can explain that, but I don't feel the consequences of moving that PACER rating down is going to be more costly than, than leaving it where it is. So, that I believe should stay in the strategic plan. Any comments? Okay, all right, so we'll leave that. Now, the next one, by December 31st, 2022, the total automobile crash rates will be reduced by 5% in Marathon County to improve traffic flow, efficiency, and safety. I do believe we want to reduce automobile crashes, but how do you quantify the 5%? And I think that's something that needs to be modified, like I said, and there could be some options as far as having updates with the Marathon County Highway Traffic Safety Team, maybe having ongoing discussions with some of the local municipalities about areas, county highways that go through their municipalities or their jurisdictions. I don't, like I said, just throwing them out there, but I think that needs to be changed. I mean, I want to encourage safer highways and roadways in Marathon County, but I think we're doing that already, but how do you quantify the 5%? Any? Supervisor Dickinson, good thing you're the
So-
vice chair, you're in charge of this.
Well, this is what I'm supposed to be handling anyway, right?
Yeah.
But you're in charge of all of it, so I defer. The outcome measure to me is what we talked about with the safety plan, implementing and maintaining a safety plan that will address newer technologies to reduce crashes. We talked about rumble strips, edge line, we talked about signage, all of those kinds of things within the safety plan. So to me, that's the outcome measure, because you're never going to be able to, you can do all of that, we can implement all of these changes, and then you get God forbid, another pandemic, and all of a sudden everything changes again and all the numbers are going up and down because you can't control what people are going to do in that regard.
Okay, so how do we want to reword it? Or Jim, go ahead.
Our staff recommendation is we develop that safety transportation plan. There's a lot of items in there. If we just put in there that we'll, complete 2 to 3 items of that safety plan each year, that would, help speed up some of the process with that. So, again, that comes with funding. Everything costs money to do stuff in that safety plan, but if we can accomplish 2 or 3 items a year out of the safety plan, I think that would put us in the right direction.
Thank you. Administrator Lerner.
Can I ask a question, Jim? Building on Supervisor Dickinson's point about maintaining that safety plan that was completed in 2021, is there a way perhaps to have that as a strategy that, we do maintain that safety plan? Just going back to our recent ERC meeting, we're talking about a groundwater protection plan. The last time we had one of those done was 2001, I think. So, is there if we were to strategy to maintain a timely, or I'm not, words are escaping me this morning, but maintain an appropriate safety plan, a highway transportation safety plan. Is that something that makes sense to you, or?
Yeah, I think we're trying to accomplish the same thing. I'm jumping to the,
Yours is making, I mean, it's one thing to have the plan, and it's another thing to, hey, every year we gotta knock some things off the plan, because it's been my experience, we have a great many plans, and sometimes our progress isn't charted and followed up upon, so I wanna make sure we keep a separation between a strategy and what does that look like, how do you know we're moving it? Like, every year, we're gonna come forward with a budget that addresses 2 to 3 of those. Is different than, in my mind, maintaining the plan. But just throwing that out for consideration by the committee.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
I think the difference is the strategy versus the objective, and I think the objective is 2 to 3 projects a year based on the 2021 county roadway safety plan. I think when you put the completed in the language in there, it makes it look like we wanted to complete the projects within 2021, and I think we want to do that on an annual basis. So maybe on an annual basis, complete 2 to 3 safety recommendations from the 2021 county roadway safety plan.
Thank
And
you.
this is a short-term strategic plan. We probably won't be updating the safety plan during the period of this strategic plan.
So are you referring to a strategy or an outcome measure?
Outcome measure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. So the strategy is we have a plan, we have a safety plan, maintaining. The outcome then is we're doing something with that plan, which is the 2 items a year to address safety. I would just put a little bit of caution in there that, not having to do the 2, because then there's costs involved that we might not be able to do the 2, but that's one way simply to measure the work that's being done.
Thank you. All right, everybody good with that consensus? Go ahead.
I did just want to add one thing. As we removed a couple strategies, I think putting Central Wisconsin Airport in here should be done. That one of our strategies should be supporting Central Wisconsin Airport. It's in the comprehensive plan as an item. And given the economics and the tourism and other development that's happening like at Granite Peak, that I think that needs to remain a focus. In the comprehensive plan, there's an item 6 that says support the Central Wisconsin Airport, continue to maintain a partnership between Portage and Marathon counties to support Central Wisconsin as a regional airport.
Yeah, I believe that's a good idea. Administrator or Supervisor Seibert?
I'd like to touch on that airport. I'm on the airport board, and so is Chris. There's 5 flights a day out of there. They're probably 5 flights short. Businesses, we just have the numbers from, I believe it's Greenheck. Greenheck has to transfer 15 people a week to other airports because they cannot fly out of Mosinee because they don't have the room. And that's one business. So how many other businesses are going to Appleton, Green Bay, La Crosse, Madison, out of Marathon County because the carriers won't give us airplanes. So I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, or if we can have the county board write letters or politicians or whatever. But the airport, to the airport, it's a big problem. So that's what I've got. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So go ahead, Gary.
Well, I'm new. I'm not that familiar with the comp plan, but it seems to me that is with regard to a strategy. Have we ever thought about the trail when we build new roads? Are we thinking about side bicycle lanes or in any kind of a way when we build new bridges? Are we building them wide enough for the bicyclers? And I know this may be a part of the metro plan, but I'm thinking of Highway A or whatever those county roads that stretch throughout Marathon County, O or whatever, as I transfers Highway O, should we be thinking, and maybe we haven't been thinking, about how we develop safe bicycle lanes or even a separate path throughout the county? We have the Mountain Bay Trail, which gets us in from Eland into close to Wausau and Weston, but I don't know if that's something that belongs here or somewhere else. But I think that the county should be thinking about how we develop safe routes, not only for cars and trucks, but also for bicyclers and also pedestrians if they want it. But I think, I'm not sure, but I'm just sort of bringing that thought, and it may be sitting somewhere else, and I wish it would be, but when I see the word infrastructure, I would want that to be I would think that that's a part of that infrastructure planning that the county should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Just to address that, as Mr. Leonard mentioned before, there's all kinds of plans, and I don't know how many different bike plans there are for Marathon County right now, but the Parks Department, Jamie Powell and I, matter of fact, just met last week. Lance had put that on our work plan for 2022, so we are in the process of, I would say we're maybe about 3/4 of the way through that plan right now. So it is being addressed, and we should hopefully have a draft to you probably, I would guess, by the October meeting for both the Parks and Rec and the infrastructure to review.
Thank you. And we do have, under Chapter 8, ensure Marathon County accommodates bicycle pedestrians and transit and applicable based on the county's complete street policy. So we do have that in there. It's not brought forward from the comp plan. That would be an option of bringing that into the strategic plan if you think it's something, but it is in the comp plan. Go ahead, Jerry.
You guys know I'm an active cyclist, and I think two of the things that strike me is the community has done, the MPO does a great job of coordinating bike planning, but there's nothing outside the MPO for any opportunity for cyclists to speak to the infrastructure committee. So, I mean, I think one of the things that could be done long-term is there could be a county look at having some kind of bike and ped advisory committee. And the two places where I would see that was most evident is when we rebuilt B 2 or 3 years ago. We had a number of cyclists come to infrastructure to speak to having at least a 2-foot shoulder on there, and that was denied. And so there's no, you know, that was a disappointment to me because that's a route that cyclists could have biked between Mosinee and Mosinee and Marathon City. And there's no shoulder on that road, which that was a great opportunity lost. And the second thing is that same thing came up with rumble strips. I personally think rumble strips are incredibly unsafe for cyclists, and Jim and I have big disagreement on this. But you know, there ought to be a voice for cyclists in the infrastructure community for the county, and there's not. So those are two places where I think that was evident.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson.
Yeah, I would offer up to the cyclists, not being one myself. We had the ATV groups come in and really spoke to us a lot about access on the roads. So I appreciate, you know, the cyclists in the room and all those folks who want to use the roads for that, and certainly am open to that. And I think it actually is a good idea when you're thinking long term. You're thinking about a transportation plan, and that to think about, you know, how can we open up some of those roads to make them more accessible so that others can travel, because there is a lot of opportunity, recreational opportunity and tourism opportunity. So thanks.
Thank you. So ideas added as a strategy, or it's up to the committee. It's in the comp plan, but it's not in the strategic plan. So, Supervisor Gislin?
So just carrying forth a appropriate bike and pedestrian committee or subcommittee, or however we want to at least starting getting it on paper so that it's in front of us. The city has, of course, a city bike ped committee, or subcommittee that works throughout the city with, and I know the Metropolitan Planning Committee has the appropriate, but I think like I said before, I think we need to be thinking about the county, and I think that might be a good way of starting at least the discussion. Nothing comes quickly, but at least we can maybe start and thinking about how we do this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so what's the flavor of the committee as far as adding that as a strategy or leaving it? Supervisor Dickinson?
So I guess I would look at the strategy. I would have no problem implementing something, putting in that strategy, and the focus being in Chapter 8 under infrastructure, it talks about a safe, efficient, fiscally sustainable multimodal transportation system. So what you're doing is you're promoting county roads to accommodate more than just trucks and cars, which Jim is probably burning laser beams through my head right now over there. But having a focus to when there are opportunities, how do you provide additional access for those others, and that would include in that ATVs.
Correct. So, strategy that is, or outcome measure,
I think it would just be a strategy to promote I don't know what you would call it, multimodal or access on county roads.
okay.
Someone can wordsmith that, like a lawyer in the room, maybe.
It would be very long if he did it, but license. But anyways, okay. So we'll draw up a new strategy. We remove several of them so we can add that strategy. Is there any other? Go ahead.
And we're adding CWA?
Oh, yes. Yes. So we'll add the CWA and then multimodal transportation for bicyclists. All right, I think with that, we are done with our two objectives. And is there any other discussion on that? Otherwise, we'll have the administrator drop a draft and we can review it at next meeting. Okay? All right. And this is not like we have a 2-hour meeting. But anyways, moving on to number 7, education presentations and committee discussion. 7A, review of the 2050 transportation plan. And we need to start looking at that now. It's 2050, but there's going to be some serious shortfalls for next year's budget. And in your packet, there are some information on there. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Griesbach to lead us on this discussion.
So I put together about a 2-hour presentation for you this afternoon here. No lunch involved. So we've had the 2050 plan in front of us for some time, and we've been tossing it back and forth. But really, what does it mean for Marathon County is where we want to get to here today. One of the biggest thing in this whole 2050 project is the gap analysis. You can go through everything. There's a lot of good charts in there, a lot of good information. When it comes down to what we're talking about, everything does cost some money to keep our infrastructure system as we have it maintained right now. We discussed this a little bit earlier in our strategic plan that years back, this committee has said we want to strive to keep our roads at a level 7 of the PACER rating, which Kevin will get into the PACER rating a little bit here. But the PACER rating is a scale of 1 to 10, and we've decided a long time ago that we want to keep our roads at a 7. And again, Kevin will get into the numbers a little bit, but once you go after that 7, it's gonna start costing you more money for every, if you go from a 6 to bring it back up, the 7's gonna cost you a certain amount. If you go down to a 5, it's gonna start costing you more money. You know, to quantify, say, what's it gonna cost on a basis if we wanna take our roads from a 7 down to a 6, what's that gonna cost? I can't tell you that number, okay? There's too many variables. There's, you know, we'd have to do a pavement analysis on 613 miles of roads. We'd have to do some asset management, and we just don't have staff, time, or money to do that. But one thing I can tell you is, if we don't start maintaining those roads at a 7, in the long run, it's gonna cost you a lot more dollars, tax money, to bring those roads back up. So here we're looking at, you know, you can start looking down the road, and if you want to start looking way down to 2040, you can say, oh, we're going to be $5.3 million short. But what you need to do is start talking short term. Already next year, we're going to be at $333,000 short if we maintain the exact funding level that we are right now. So what you can start seeing is a deterioration of those roads.
Is it turned on? Yeah, there you go.
Again, we're looking at $333,000 short in '23, 563,801. You see those numbers just start rising rapidly here. So you have a couple options. You can start reducing the level of service to pay for that. You can remove some of our capital projects. We just talked again, a strategic plan. We've been doing an excellent job getting funding from the federal and the state, you know, millions of dollars every year, upcoming years. But all that comes with a match money. Most of the times it's 20%, sometimes it's 50%. But you can start giving back some of that federal money. Personally, I don't think that's a good way to go. If somebody's going to give me, every time I give them 20 cents, they're going to give me 80 cents back, I'll buy rolls and rolls of dimes.
$1 every time they give.
Yeah, $1. Well, yeah, 20 cents on it. I pay 20, you pay 80. That's a good way to go. The other way is we could reduce the level of service for winter maintenance and transfer those funds in. Our phones ring regularly off the hook right now that we don't provide maintenance enough. Our general, what we do right now is we like to beat the storm out there. So we'll go out at 4 in the morning to make sure that traffic that's going into work at 6 is able to get there, and this is on the county system. And we'll usually stay out there till about 6 or 7 at night to make sure people get back. We don't run through the night. Major storms, we might run a couple trucks through the metro area just to keep the roads open in case the sheriff's department calls that we have a vehicle out there. But you could start cutting back on winter maintenance to pay for this. Or again, we can just look at a lower performance on our highways. Instead of going to 7 to 10, we could go look at a 6 to 10 or something less. Kevin's going to handle the whole PACER portion, so I'll let Kevin take over here.
Okay, I'll give you guys just a quick briefing on what PACER is. It's a state of Wisconsin has that program for all municipalities. It's the pavement surface evaluation rating. So we get a nice little book like this, and it has different narratives and pictures of all of the ratings. Essentially, what it comes down to is it's a visual scoring of your road. You go out there, take a look at it. 10's a brand new pavement. There's no flaws in it. 9, you start to see some cracks after a couple of years, and then it dwindles all the way down to 1, where you're going to have like gravel patches over the top of your potholes to get past your road. Our county system, we run everything. We're between 3 and 10 on ours. We've never had anything down below a 3. A 3 is a pretty treacherous road that you're not going to be traveling safely at 60 miles an hour down without hitting potholes and having things that we would be addressing. So that's where our system's at. That 7 is an average rating. So we do our segments typically in about at least 1 mile pieces, and it's often in like the 3 mile segments as the pavements were placed. So we'll take that whole segment and give it a rating, and then we average that out. So if you take the number of miles times the 4s times the 5s, the 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, and then you average that, divide it by, or total all up, divide it by 614, that's where we get our 7. So just for every 10 miles of 4s of very bad pavements out there, we have the same on the 10s to kind of build that average that we have out there. So we don't aim to make them all 7s and keep them there. It's that overall network that we have. The things we look for on those ratings is going to be cracking, rutting, alligator cracks, and potholes. Those are the main features we look for. And then the frequency and the spacing of that is how we get that score. You've got your chart up already. So the little life cycle chart that's up there, the far left side is a very good. That's going to be your 10 up on top. That's your brand new pavement. And the way pavement models work is there's a period of time where you stay a very good quality pavement. And then as you start to go through time, environmental factors and traffic start to wear down that pavement. It starts to deteriorate, like asphalt loses its flexibility. And what happens later in the life of a pavement is it generally takes a very steep turn. So once you get into usually in that 16 to 25 year range, depending on your subgrades and soils and traffic and all of that, that pavement will fall off very quickly. What these models show, if you guys can see that $1 of rehab kind of in the middle of the chart, what they're saying is if by implementing low cost countermeasures or pavement preservation in there, you can keep yourself from getting down to those $5 repairs later in life. Our next slide, we kind of have what those low cost items are. Actually, our last one. This is the same kind of life cycle here, but then it lists in there what those activities are. The further over you go to the left, the lower cost those are. The further you go to the right towards the end of the pavement's life, the higher cost they are. So that first one showed $1 early, saves you $5 later. I'll go with the extreme examples on this chart. The fog seal on the far left is about $1 per square yard, and the full depth reconstruction is probably $15 to $20 per square yard. So that's and everything kind of fits in the middle there. As you get to mill and overlay, it's about $10 a square yard. So it's just progressively more expensive as you go and more extreme repairs. This next slide lists the main activities that we do at the Highway Department, and they're pretty much in level of cost as well. So we start out with the most basic and the most cost-effective pavement preservation is crack filling, getting out there and just filling your cracks where you know you have an opening in your pavement and moisture's getting in. Crack leveling, if you guys ever see where it looks like a wide band that we put down and the road goes from having dips in it that your tires hit to being more leveled out. We put a little bit more structure in there. It's probably about twice the cost of crack filling, but it fills the crack, plus it improves the ride, which improves the quality of the road. Lane wedging is when we're filling in tire tracks, when we get heavy loads, especially over clay soils. Our subgrades start to move. We start to get some rutting in our wheel pass. We can fill those in pretty cost effectively. The next two items are full surface treatments, fog seals and chip seals. We use, it's called a GSB, it's a gilsonite fog seal where we're just spraying an asphalt sealant over the top of our pavement. It's kind of like putting sunscreen on for your skin in the summer. It helps keep the elements off, helps that asphalt last a little bit longer. Chip seal's a step further. It's about 3 times the oil application rate, plus we add aggregate to it. It's cost effective. It's a very cost competitive market. We have several contractors that do that work very well, and they compete very well for it, so you get a lot of bang for your buck. It is also messy. Bicyclists do not like it, right, Jerry? So it's a messier treatment. It does obscure your pavement markings and reduces that. So there are some drawbacks to it. And we also have had, throughout the Midwest, chip seals going back to about 2008 to present. There have been some isolated incidents where they cause failure in your asphalt, and Marathon County, we've experienced some of that ourselves. It's a waterproofing layer, and then it actually causes some deterioration in the top of the asphalt, depending on your chemistry of your oils, your aggregates, and the environmental factors. Jim and I have sat through meetings with Minnesota DOT, their research department, because Minnesota had a huge issue with this. And it's just kind of a combination of a bunch of things. So we have had setbacks with our pavement preservation that we've had to address. If you guys get out there and want to see it, Highway A and O right now, where those two roads intersect, those are two of the roads that we did experience some of those setbacks with chip seal. So just because they showed those nice low-cost things make your stuff last longer, it's not always perfect. There are a lot of factors that go into this, and sometimes a quick $1 fix on a chip seal does not buy you what you think you're getting out of it. Next ones are all getting into our asphalt paving program. Thin overlays we've implemented starting back in about 2008, and they've been very cost effective to go out and restore a ride in a road and cover up and preserve the asphalt that's underneath it. That's where we're putting down usually an inch or less of asphalt on a road. We've had some really good success stories with that, where we've preserved 15-year-old roads, and right now we had one, it was paved in 98, and this year we put an overlay in it in 2008 because it had some early cracking going on, and that 1 inch of asphalt lasted till this year, and now we just did an 1.5 inch mill and overlay on it, so another lower cost repair, and we'll probably get that road to be about a 40-year-old road by the time we have to go back in and do a full reconstruction with it. So we have implemented some of these things that are on here and had success stories with them. Mill and overlays, that's one step further, where you're actually milling off your old asphalt up on top and then putting about a 2-inch asphalt on top of it. And cold in place recycling is a process where we'll grind up the entire thickness of the asphalt. We'll add some asphalt oil to that as an emulsion. It's a cold mix asphalt that gets blended into it and restabilized, replaced with the paver, and then we put a hot mix surface on top of that. And then pulverize and pave that's kind of our reconstruct without completely rebuilding a road, where we're grinding up a road completely, we're regrading it, recompacting it, and then putting a full asphalt thickness down on it. And just to give you guys some quick numbers, those last 4 items, thin overlays are probably 60,000 a mile, mill and overlays about 110, cold in place is about 175 to 180,000 a mile, and then that pulverize, we're probably up in the low 220s, 230s right now. So just to give you guys a little bit of economies of scale of how those things all roll in there. All right, that next table we have in there, this is our PACER data from 2004 through 2021. Every odd year, we have to report to the state all of our PACER ratings. So what we do then is, we've been keeping this chart. We take those total miles in there, figure out what percentage of the system is each rating, and then we're kind of tracking that average on the bottom. We've been pretty consistent. I think 6.8 or 6.66 was our lowest. We had a couple years where we had less paving out there, and then we've been hovering right around 7 ever since then. So essentially what this comes down to is the level of investment we've been putting into for the miles of pavement that we do each year has been doing very well to maintain us at that 7. So that chart that Jim had with the gap analysis essentially is, if we want to keep maintaining the system at the level we're at, a mechanism to do that is to keep rebuilding at the pace we have been, and then we just need to look at what those rising costs are going to be each year and be able to maintain the investment for whatever those annual cost increases are.
As we talked before about the road ratings, Kevin mentioned 10, so I just kind of want to give you some visuals on what some of these are. I didn't go do a 9 and a 10. 10's a new road, 9's a pretty new road. So here's a PACER rating 8. You're still going to have some cracks in it, but it's all maintained. This picture here shows that the cracks are greater than 20 feet, and they're filled in nicely, and we've been out there maintaining. So that's an 8. Here's a 7. A 7 is when the crack starts getting 20 feet or less. We have some of them filled. You see the longitudinal along the center line filled, but we need to come in there and fill a little bit more. There's not much potholing or raveling at this point. This is our goal, to have the roads at minimum of this level. Again, you're going to start seeing and feeling these roads already at a 7 if you're driving down them. When you start getting below the 7, then it starts getting, Kevin and I'll go out and rate these roads together. We'll say, is that a 7? Is that a 6? Is that a 5? They start blending together about that 5, 6 stage, okay? So here we have some rating at 6. It's tough to see, but on the right side, there's starting to be some cracking down the wheel tracks, and there's actually some rutting going on there. So when it rains, you're going to have water sitting in those cracks. On the left, we had a road that was chip sealed and it's starting to peel off. So, you know, when we plow, it hits the high points and is leaving the low points. So you see that's a 6. Here's a 5. Again, there's a lot of wheel rutting with water in them. We have some potholes in that road that have been patched. It's starting to alligate. That's what a 5 would somewhere fall into. And a 4, this is a 4. Things that aren't maintained, cracking less than 20 feet, more alligating. You notice the picture on the left, the cracks at this point are probably wide enough they really can't be maintained just by going out there and routing and crack filling. So that's what a 4 looks like. I just kind of want to give you some type of visuals on those ratings, because I know I've heard talk about, well, maybe we should lower that rating to a 6 or 5, just so you know what that looks like. I've also been a little chatter on, all right, what's the traffic on our roads? Thanks to all the ATV people that were in, we had just borrowed this map from them on the traffic volumes. So if you look at the chart here, anything in the green, and again, we just pulled this off the DOT sites, and you're gonna have little segments that we would have to clean up, because once all they show like a half-mile segment pops way high, but you kind of get the general picture. If it's a green, that is traffic below 400. If you have that golden color, that is from 500 to 750. The light purple is 750 to 1,000, and a darker purple is 1,000 to 1,250. So, you know, there's been the thought process out there, maybe some of these low volume areas we can drop down to a 6. I just want to let you know, a majority of these roads, where they fall. A lot of our roads are on that 500 or less out there. Again, all those greens fall in that 500 or less. So we have some next steps here. In August, Tim Ramberg, colleague of mine, used to be a commissioner at St. Croix County. He's going to do a presentation on the general transportation aids and projections. Tim is probably the best person in the state to talk about GTA. He can start giving us some numbers and say, all right, if we spend additional $333,000, what would that mean to us on our GTA? Because that GTA is based on a 6-year average. Our GTA right now has been holding steady, if not dipping. It's been dipping a little bit because our 6-year average, we had a large project out toward Marshfield on County Chunk Highway E that fell off that 6-year average and is hurting our money that's coming in. Now that GTA is based on just not our 6-year average. There's a long formula and it's based on what money's available, what's the uses around the state. So we just can't say, if we go up and spend an extra $333,000, it's gonna mean exactly this much. We can get you close, or that's come they're called projections, because we don't know what the other 71 counties are doing out there. So Tim will talk to us next month about that. We can have some discussions on where we're gonna get the funding for maintenance if we wanna continue down this road. And again, there's a discussion on the level of service. Do we wanna have different levels of service for different volumes? Or should we have the same level for all the county? And what should that level be? So I think I'll let it up to I'll turn it back over to Craig at this point.
Can I just add one thing? I guess it's a previous step with Mr. Ramberg, just so the committee's aware. In the previous term of the board, one of the first questions Jim and I asked was, you know, are we properly submitting all of our project costs for that GTA calculation, that complicated calculation that Jim referenced? And we did engage Mr. Ramberg to take a look at kind of the way we've been doing business in accounting. And I've got good news and bad news. The good news, we've been doing a fairly good job of making sure that we're maximizing our GTA. The bad news of that is that doesn't mean, hey, we can keep doing the same thing and we're gonna get more money. we've been doing well with the way that we've been accounting for our projects. But Mr. Ramberg was very helpful in that. And as we move forward, you know, when you talk about service levels, once you make the determination on what level of service you want, when we get into that kind of middle piece, future funding, and that's within that transportation sustainability plan, you have that gap analysis. We can develop for you, we can show you what opportunities exist for generating revenue, really, is the, how do we're gonna pay for it? We can bring those options back to you. They're fairly limited, but, you know, just to foreshadow a little bit, a thing that, in speaking with a lot of my colleagues, the vast majority of counties that I speak to are really utilizing short-term borrowing for a lot of the work that Jim and his team do. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, Jim certainly can take them.
Go ahead, Supervisor Everett.
Just one, Jim. Does the state highways have a PACER rating in Marathon County?
Yeah, they actually use a system called Compass. They don't use Pacer. They have a different system on the way they do it. They have Compass that's supposed to be done every year, and we help them with their ratings, and they have not contacted us in the last 3 years for Compass ratings. They have limited staff, and they have not done their ratings on the state road for about 3 years now.
Okay. Do they adjust their maintenance to that rating, or they just fix?
That's actually what our RMAs, our routine maintenance agreements, based on. They come up with a level of service. So when they do the Compass, or did the Compass, they would come up with a number and say, if you want to have all of your roads at 100% of level of service, this is the funding you're going to need. They've been funding less than that 100% at this point.
Okay, thanks.
That's how come you see 153.
Thank you. So, thank you for that presentation. And it's something that we're going to have to start discussing now, as far as the funding shortfalls that we're going to have. The 333,000 for next year and 564 for the year after. And I guess what I want to ask the committee is, if we want to continue the same maintenance at that PACER rate of seven, how are we going to accomplish that with the known lack of funds starting next year? And I think Administrator Leonard said there's some funding options. We can short-term borrow or long-term borrow. We can increase the vehicle registration fee, or we can cut back on maintenance. I don't know what the thoughts are of the committee, but these are this gap that we're going to have is real, and it's going to have to be dealt with starting at this next budget. So I'm looking for suggestions, solutions for how we're going to start dealing with this. Supervisor Robinson and then Supervisor Christensen.
I just want to put some of this back into context, and this is the gap analysis in the report were driven off of our desire to look at what Washington County had done relative to their 2050 or 30-year plan. In part of it was a response to our, when first thing they did was they cut the highway projects out. That impacted our 6-year average, and we lost general transportation aid. It was an easy fix at the budget time, but it had long-term consequences, and we were trying to do this. But let me caution you in the gap analysis. The gap analysis assumes we maintain our roads in their present state, doesn't deal with the issues of bike lanes, and it doesn't deal with the issue of all-season roads. In Washington County, which developed this, all of the county roads were all-season roads, and we continue to have pressures from dairy farmers and other industries to try to increase the seasonality of our roads, to remove weight restrictions on them. So this is a conservative estimate of what we'll need going forward. I think that in lieu of levy limits and others, we need to look at being creative. Short-term borrowing is one of those options, and we need to look at the tools that we have, and I think that's protecting the vehicle registration fee and looking at others. But The costs are not going down. The cost for rebuilding our current roads is $210,000 a mile, versus if we go with an all-season road, it's about $1 million a mile, to put some things in perspective. So we need to have the tools available to maintain and meet our strategic objectives.
Thank you. Supervisor Christensen? Dickinson, I mean, same thing.
He's back. You know, I guess I would say roads are one of the most important things that we do in the county. So you have to have good roads for just a multitude of reasons. And, you know, where we are, I mean, Supervisor Sorbert and myself were talking about 153. People have been talking about Highway 153 in the state level for years, and how just terrible it is in so many levels. So having the rating and meeting a standard where our county roads are going to be, never get to that point, is what we have to have. And talking about the money, I would like to see some talk about where do you find money in our current budget as opposed to short-term borrowing. Because again, roads are important. They are just for so many different reasons. So let's look at, is there available money within the budget to pull in, rather than saying, hey, let's borrow some.
Thank you. Any other suggestions? I think realistically, we know we want to keep the pacer rate and the maintenance up on our roads. So there's going to have to be, as Supervisor Dickinson said, try to find the money in our current budget, or, like I said, maybe short-term borrowing for, you know, the different levels of service that we need right now. We, you know, like I said, or raise the registration fee to keep up with, you know, with the maintenance that we need on the roads. Everybody agrees that we need to keep the roads in the same conditions, and we still hear that people are complaining about how bad the roads are. I think they're talking about, you know, not county roads, but when they are bad, people let you know. So I don't know what, you know, what the next steps are, but Administrator Leonard?
This just occurred to me as Supervisor Dickinson was talking about, you know, looking at innovative approaches and certainly looking at our current budget allocations across the organization. The only, I shouldn't say the only, one other potentiality we can look at is, and it's referenced within your 2050 plan, is engaging local municipalities on the issue of jurisdictional transfers. That is, you know, the state has been trying to give us 153 since, how long, Jim? 1990, and we have respectfully declined that generous offer. We could engage municipalities to see what their appetite would be for jurisdictional transfers, and there is within that document a breakdown of the percentage of lane miles within each of the incorporated and unincorporated areas throughout the county. My sense, and I haven't had these conversations yet, but my sense from speaking with my colleagues in particularly Washington County, which is what Supervisor Robinson referenced with kind of they were the impetus for this discussion here, is that those jurisdictional transfers require inducement. That is, you need to provide something to the other municipality to take responsibility for that road, and I think Jim can give us, or that segment of road, Jim can give us a little bit of history on when we've done those in the past, but again, if we want to go that route, we can do that. That takes part of the system and puts it on another municipality, so there are some system impacts to doing that. But if you'd like us to do that, specific direction would be helpful. That's not something we've actively done or developed a plan for inducement. You know, there's no fund sitting anywhere that says this is earmarked for roadway transfers, but just throwing out another kind of innovative approach we might want to look at.
Thank you. Any other discussion at this point? I think we're going to need a lot more information as we continue to discuss this, but it needs to be a continued discussion that we have at infrastructure. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas besides, and I don't know if between now and the next meeting, if we can get that information on the transfers or what's been done.
Yeah, Jim and I can Jim probably can answer when the last time we've done it and if there were any inducements given, and I can reach out to Washington County.
No, the last two that I can recall is we transferred County Trunk Highway Double N to Marathon, probably around the year 2000. We did a section of Spencer. We turned over a section of Highway V in Spencer. Both times, basically, all we did is when we repaved the road, we turned it over to them. Speaking to Spencer, after that time, we had another segment that we want to turn over, and they said you need to do a lot more than just repave the road. So, as Lance mentioned, you may need to entice him somehow. Just repaving the road will probably not do it.
Thank you. Chairman Gibbs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, and I appreciate Supervisor Dickinson's comment. At the same token, sitting on the HR Finance Committee and also chairing this board, I don't see the demands for the service. It's incumbent upon us, if we're going to give direction to the administrator to find money in the current budget, then we need to identify what programs we want cut or what levels we want cut of which programs. Because ultimately it's our budget, and to say that there's money in the budget to be able to cut, we need to identify them. So it is not the administrator will do whatever this board sees fit, but we need to give that direction. And to sit there and say, well, let's just find it in this year budget. By sitting on the HR Finance Committee and understanding the total needs of the county and the departments, we're going through a upgrade of our finance system, which is a extremely huge undertaking. That hasn't been taken place for 25 years. We're doing a wage study, which currently we're soliciting employees for over almost 10% of the workforce in the county, and so we know that our pay compensation is probably going to be underfunded by estimate anywhere from $1 to $2 million. So there's going to be additional demands on the budget for that, and so I'm not against looking at anything in the service, but understand that there's constituencies that may be affected by those programs if you're looking at cutting some programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Supervisor Dickinson.
The way I look at it, Mr. Chair, my request isn't a demand upon the administrator. However, it's more of a request and an ask in the sense that the administrator knows the budget and none of us here do. We may think we do because we are given some slides or presentation or that sort of thing, and which we appreciate. However, we don't have line item budgets that are delivered to us ever. So I can't go in and say maybe we should cut out $333 in travel costs to things like the WCA convention or other, NACO and all these kinds of things. We could find money in our budget. I think we're all smart individuals. All of us supervisors are. There's other people who would probably be willing to look at that as well. And certainly if we had some sort of budget that I could look at, sure, I can look in there and try to find some ways to cut out $333,000 so that we can have roads that affect everybody in the community and people outside of the community and county when they travel for tourism and that through our area. I certainly would be most willing. So I am not demanding, Mr. Chair, that the administrator come up with the numbers. It was simply a comment in that one of the things, and I will always say this, and it's not said enough, one of the things that I think I need to strive more for as a county supervisor is ways to reduce costs in a time when costs are going out of control. Instead of saying, let's just layer on more costs to deal with what we currently have. That isn't to say that any one person who works here isn't valuable, but it has to be, how are we going to be responsible with the money that we have to the greatest part of our county? So that's how I would address that to you, Mr. Chair. So, you know, we can go ahead and get a budget with some more detailed information. We could certainly can look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, because of the time, I think with the presentation we're going to receive next week from that Tim Randberg on the GTA, I think that'll help us continue this discussion, but continue to look at that 2050 plan and more so the next 2 years as far as the shortages we're going to have. So is there any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll move on to the last topic. Yeah, Supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor. I just have one. I would like to see the total number for all the shortfalls, not just the highway department, but for salaries through the rest of the county, through just an increase in fuel oil cost for these vehicles to be on the road. I mean, is it going to be 5 million? Is it going to be 4 million? What is our total shortfall going to be? It's easy to say 333,000 to find 333,000 in a budget the size of our budget, but I'm sure it's a lot more than 333,000. So what number is that? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can tell you as part of my, take very seriously that you guys adopt a budget, the county board adopts a budget every year, and I do ask departments to keep me apprised of significant potentialities for overages. And to your specific question about fuel, I've been asking that, and it's certainly going to I have a spreadsheet I put together, and I'm happy to share it, where I categorize departments into one of 4 categories. On the low end, not really a big issue. On the high end, significant issue that that the department envisions having to seek a budget transfer to an inter-department budget transfer from like contingency or reserve to fill. Right now, I don't have anybody in that 4th column. I have some people in the middle in column 3 where we're doing internal things to deal with it, most notably Jim's department and the sheriff's office. But certainly to your point, Supervisor, we are managing the budget, making changes. A lot of those costs we're managing internally. So I don't anticipate right now, knock on a wood product, that I'm going to be coming to you for a contingency transfer. But as soon as I think I am going to have to do that, I will make everyone aware on the board.
Thank you.
Sorry, and you asked a question about wages. We don't have that number yet of what it is going to cost or what it would cost if the board were to adopt the wage study that is currently underway through our consultant. Because the wage study's not done yet, but one of the components of that study is not only what does a competitive pay plan look like, where are our people on that plan, and then the last part, what would it cost to implement that plan, and we'll bring forward those options to you as soon as we have them.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll move on to 7B, the July Commissioners' Report, which
I'll make it brief. You have it in your packet. I just want to point out 2 items on it. The Wisconsin County Highway Association's been contacted by WisDOT. They can handle the workload that they have for oversight of a lot of these programs that we're asking for money for. So they're talking to the Wisconsin County Highway Association if we could help them out. We're looking at possibly bringing staff on to WCHA to help with the oversight on SDP local bridges and roads just on the county system. So, and then WisDOT would reimburse us for that. So it'd be a good revenue stream for Wisconsin County Highway Association if that would work. And the last paragraph was just note on June 23rd, we were extremely lucky not to lose 2 workers again on a work zone on Highway 29. If Cody wouldn't have as quick as reflexes as he did. He had been hit by a box truck on Highway 29 doing full speed. He was able to dive out of the way. He got missed by about 18 inches just because he dove out of the way. So please pass the word to everybody when you get into work zones to take extra caution, because we're extremely lucky not to have 2 workers either injured or killed on that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, were they able to locate the truck?
No, time they got their bearings, all they seen was a white box truck drive away.
Jim, would it be wise if the news media would put your little video you made a couple years ago?
We've contacted them, and usually during Work Zone Safety Week, I always contact them, and I don't get much response.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jim? All right. Moving on to 8 announcements, 8A, future meetings and agenda items for next meeting, which is August 4th, 2022 at 9 a.m. If there's anything you'd like on the agenda, and I apologize for having such a long meeting, but we did get a lot accomplished, and thank you. Moving to number 9, looking for adjournment from Supervisor Robinson, and second from Supervisor Dickinson. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.